Under what dark sun doth align the sons of Sheol in modern time? In the age of eyes, where do they hide the rising of black Aeons' tide? No secret can be hidden when all is brought to light. Where then can be the crevice which seepeth eldritch blight? To this the answer and truth be told, for I have seen the way. What need is there for subterfuge when disrepute holds sway? No ancient word of horror wrought would ever be believed, nor seen as truth a formless horror nowadays conceived. 'Twould be seen as artistry or work of silver screen, not as truly monstrous, but simply as a meme. There hide the star-spawned horrors and obelisks of despair, and deluges of media that we all like and share. Myths and legend, history and hysteria, religion and the far reaches of the occult. These and more are the children of a common thing, belief, an intrinsic part of what makes us human. I'm your host, Liam Blackwood, an independent scholar of esoterica and eccentricity, a rational skeptic, father of two, writer, and lover of life. Pull up a chair, fellow lamplighters, and let us cast the shadows back a bit as we examine what lies beneath the light of Occam's lantern. Mimetically propagated eldritch grotesquerie, or IMPEG, yes, terribly inventive, was a short piece of cosmic horror fluff that I wrote back in November 14th, 2018. And nearly 8 years later, I'm not entirely convinced it was fiction. Today's episode is going to be a little different from the others, a bit looser in structure, if not in purpose. Consider it something of a herald for our 10th episode, a bit of a milestone, if you will. A certain magister from the Church of Satan told me that most podcasts never quite make it this far. People get excited, record a handful of episodes, life gets busy, interest fades, and another voice quietly disappears into the static. But we're still here, not quite a ghost yet. So then, what are we talking about today? While we won't be doing a traditional deep dive subject, I will be reading some essays of mine, as well as we take the time to discuss the slippery subject without definite definition, Aeons. Or perhaps eras, ages, epochs. The names themselves matter very little. Since long before recorded history, humanity has had a peculiar habit of looking backward and placing markers in the rivers of time, dividing history into neat little compartments, giving names to stretches of civilization as though one day simply woke up and declared itself to be the beginning of something new. Of course, that's never really how it happens. Now, I don't mean scientific eras like the Paleolithic or Proterozoic, nor am I specifically referring to mystical concepts like the Aeon of Horus or similar esoteric traditions. Those may wander into our discussion from time to time, as many things tend to do around here, but they aren't the destination. Instead, I'd like to begin with a question. How do we recognize that an age has ended? Time itself is easy enough to measure. Centuries, decades, years, months, days, hours, minutes, seconds, down further still into measurements so infinitesimal that they cease to have any practical meaning outside of laboratories. But civilizations don't move according to clocks. How do we determine when one epoch has given way to another? The transition from Stone Age to Bronze Age seems obvious enough in hindsight. New materials, new technologies, new ways of living. The Iron Age followed, and centuries later became the Industrial Age, transformation not simply of machines, but of society itself. Then came what we broadly refer to as the Information Age, where knowledge became humanity's greatest commodity and distance itself began to lose meaning. And yet, we've been calling this the Information Age for quite some time now. Long enough, I think, that it's worth asking an uncomfortable question. What if we already left it behind? Or, perhaps more accurately, what if we're standing in the doorway, watching one age quietly give way to another, without quite realizing it? Charlie McGee proposed that the Imagination Age be the name decades ago. While interesting, I think hindsight gives us something clearer. The defining characteristic of our era isn't imagination. Humanity has always possessed imagination, and what is fundamentally changed is our relationship with intelligence itself. One could certainly make the argument that the rise of artificial intelligence places imagination center stage. Type a thought into a prompt, and moments later an image, a story, a song, or a voice springs into existence. But I don't believe that artificial intelligence is the new Aeon. I think it's a symptom, a flare on the horizon, or a sign of something larger taking shape beneath our feet. And that is where I would like to begin. So, why did I label this episode as Aeons, rather than any of the other usable nomenclature? Well, in this case, Occam's razor strikes quite true, as the simplest answer is correct. I simply prefer the aesthetics of the word. As much as Chrono Trigger, the classic Super Nintendo RPG, ingrained the word epic, E-P-O-C-H, which I used to pronounce it epoch, Aeon is just so delightfully, well, E-P-I-C, epic. It's might be my appreciation of Greek and Latin, hence why I used to go by lykos, but moving forward, I would just like to say that I will be using the words interchangeably. Looking back, what seems to define an era goes from vast stretches of millennia and quickly tapers off into centuries, and into smaller bits the closer we get to the now. There were nearing 8,000 years between the Paleolithic and Bronze Age, for example, but the post-industrial machine age was less than 100 from what is commonly accepted as the start of the information age. Why is this the case? Again, the simplest answer suffices. The ever-snowballing progress of technology made developments faster, and the people began having the luxury of paying attention and marking such passages of time. I can't imagine that during the turmoil and day-to-day strife of the Bronze Age, heralding left much time to say, "Hey Dave, just invented something revolutionary. Should we call it the Irrigation Age now?" "Shut up and plow, Zephyr." As things got easier, philosophers became more everyday. Naturally, our language and ponderings concerning the markings of human progress similarly involved. But in the current condition of online information spread, and the ever-conflicting and swirling tribalism and hatred, our definitions of the when, where, and why may not ever completely agree. At least in the current world. And this is why I believe that there has not been a new era declared yet. No one would accept it. On that topic, I would like to move into one of my short essays of mine on the subject of modern tribalism, after which we will delve into my most recent writing, one done at the beginning of this year, about my thoughts on the new Aeon. Let's begin by first reading March 21st, 2018, titled The progression of tribalism. The word at its very core evokes a myriad of response, depending on whom you ask. Tribalism. To some, it carries ethnic implications, to some, outdated notions of society, and to others, a natural psychology that is ingrained in each of us. For the purpose of this writing, it is the latter that I will be discussing. Since the dawn of man, we have separated into tribes, and the very core of xenophobia is rooted in distrust of outsiders, be it martial dangers, cultural overshadowing, or even disease that our own tribe has not adapted to defend against. Our psychology has evolved to naturally distrust those who are not our own, quote unquote. As our tribes melded to form cities and then nations, our circles ever expanded. Today, the dichotomy of outsiders is almost alien to our external presentation. We are an inclusive culture as a whole, concerned with humanity as one big team rather than Team A and Team B. At least that's what we tell ourselves. In reality, we have shifted the goalposts away from such things as nationality and ethnicity, though there are those that still like to clamor for those peculiar goals. The division that drives us now is thought. And what has not lessened is the intensity, the fervor in which these tribes are defended. If anything, the call to arms has intensified to the pitch of the earliest examples of warring clans. Either one thinks the same as us or are less than us, deserving fully to be treated as such. Some have taken to referring to this phenomenon as toxic tribalism, and I believe the term is quite apropos. It is toxic in that it is a detriment to the evolution of us as a society as a whole. The opposition to have civil conversations, the idea that merely letting an opinion be spoke is tantamount to full acceptance of that opinion as fact. Erroneous ideals that lead to stagnation and entropy. Already, even the methods of combat between tribes has devolved into know you and other childish refrains. So what's the fix? To just tell everyone to get along? No. The human mind, as evolved and changed as it may be, will always crave division. We will always feel more comfortable around those we consider our own, regardless of what that form takes. Thankfully, most of us have moved past racism and other bigotry as a whole, though there will always be outliers who wish to remain in those camps, and they have been more vocal now than ever. The point remains, there will always be something. Skin color, eye color, height, weight, gender, ideas, religion, something will always be there. And as soon as we find comfort and togetherness in one of those factors, another will unveil itself like a leak in the dam. The only foreseeable panacea that I can see on the horizon is through total immersion environments, a place we can go to disconnect from all tribalism and be in a utopia of our own design for however long we wish. It used to be only through personal isolation and through reenactment that we could find this, but the reemergence of virtual reality has offered an ideal bedding for our ideological future. Now, this does not fix the current political state of us versus them, but I believe, as with all conflicts, that this one will burn and taper out. Whoever stands triumphant will do so. To the victor, history is written, and all that drivel. Total immersion environments will, however, upon their fruition, provide an avenue to curtail future budding of hatred through avoiding the irritation of conflicting existence. To avoid the idiocy of the herd, if only for a short while, sign me up. Now, I wrote that piece in 2018, same as the intro poem, but Well, it's nice to see that everything's going according to plan, so to speak. Nothing has quite changed, and if anything, it's become even more true. Total immersion environments will very likely be episode 11 after our Doomsday episode 10. As such, I won't linger much on defining the subject further from what the article itself does. Instead, I would like you to take a moment with me and ponder your tribes. Which do you belong in? Chances are that there's at least two that come to mind. Even the most introverted among us find one somewhere, if only amidst the lone wolves out there. Wordplay intended, as well as a cheeky reference to the quite excellent Brad Pitt, George Clooney-helmed Wolves movie. Check it out. I myself can name a few tribes that I belong to, even as an independent Satanist, so I'm sure you can as well. Intellectuals, Red Wings fans, Scottish, queer, these all count wholeheartedly. And I want to reiterate that tribes and tribalism are not necessarily a bad thing, especially in this scenario. They are a natural part to be embraced, an essence of what makes up our base human-animal instincts. That particular fun exercise aside, let's move into the second and mercifully the final essay of the episode. Now, this will be a rough draft of the finished product, as I've actually gotten some peer review and feedback from friends as well as a doctor within the Church of Satan whose books actually hold a place in the Lamplighter Library. As such, I will be taking a long time actually refining and reforming this, and may publish it when I'm done. With that in mind, we'll round out the essay portion of the show with this. AI as a tool of the new epoch. Written May 10th, 2026. Everything from a sharpened stick to a doomsday device is a tool. And every tool from the dawn of time can be misused by idiots. Every tool made by man has had negative and positive implications. Sharpened sticks, it can be certain, led to a lot more bloodshed. But another aspect of the aforementioned tool is our reliance upon them, and their intrinsic ties with new eras of reason, understanding, and development. They have ever been an amplification of our agency, survival, and domination over the pitfalls of our environment. One could even state that the history of humanity is the history of tools that made us more dangerous, more capable, but also more accountable. A spear burns calories. A server burns electricity. Both are extensions of our will made manifest through energy. Our problem, when it comes to artificial intelligence, is that we are seeing the beginning of such a grand epic shift for the first time amid the ever-connected worldwide digital community, and every slimy back alley and delinquent soul within is privy to that power. With that comes rampant misunderstanding, misuse, and a potentially catastrophic reaction from the public in response. So let us address these concerns. Let us inform the mistaken, debate the detractors, disarm the ignorant, and try to right the wrongs, so that this age can be one of enlightenment and not despair. There are 4 core issues when it comes to artificial intelligence, and the matter of precedence is highly dependent upon the individual's own concerns and worldview. We will address them all equally: environmental impact, use in artistic creation, abuse in corporate and authoritarian structures, and finally, the ever-apparent doomsday scenarios. On the issue of environmental impact, it goes beyond the simple aforementioned correlation to the invention of the spear. Each technological and cultural leap has left its scars. Every transformative tool of human history has increased mankind's power, our consumption, and in doing so has triggered a moral panic anchored in our primitive brains to be wary of any and all change. This is only exacerbated by social media's tendency to create echo chambers. Farming and irrigation changed the earth, displacing animals and disrupting nature. Logging stripped forests in exchange for industry. Industry made sprawling structures of community in place of the serenity of solace. Every time there was a negative impact on our surroundings, followed by a correction of the course and an eventual symbiosis of existence. In the end, these initial catastrophes upon nature led to longer lifespans, stronger societies, and a deeper understanding of science and more complex ethics. Let us begin with the truth of the matter. Data centers consume significant energy and drain natural resources in a manner that is real, measurable, and worthy of scrutiny. However, it must be said that while AI is certainly the loudest tenant of the digital ecosystem at the time, it does not live alone in the complex. Streaming, crypto mining, cloud computing, each of these drive the energy costs of natural depletion, so it stands to reason the issue is not what it does, but how it is doing it. I also want to state that I have learned that a simple image generation request from you or I consumes about as much water as running the tap for not even a second. So consider how many times you do that a day compared to this and that. There's a natural inclination for corporations, higher-ups, and things like that to push the blame onto individuals. You'll see the same happening with recycling, things like that. I'll get into that in a separate episode. That was aside from the article, just something I had read after writing this. So back to the article. The core issue is energy production. And the problem is not that we use electricity, it is how we generate it. As such, computation is growing fast, but remains a fraction of civilization's total energy appetite. We find ourselves in a transitional era for energy. Fossil fuels still dominate global grids, and new demand exposes old infrastructural limits in a way we couldn't have possibly imagined at the dawn of their usage. Grid modernization lags behind demand, and unfortunately, lobbyists and self-interest groups cling to the bygone ways, stymieing forward progress for the sake of lining their own pockets. The good news is that efficiency is already improving. Specialized technologies such as TPUs, ASICs, and more specialized AI chips, advances in cooling systems, renewable power data centers, and workload optimization is showing remarkable advancements in the face of pressure from critics and activists who are already pushing back against the destructive practices that have haphazardly laid the groundwork. Technology trends towards efficiency over time, and early inefficiency is typical of all initial efforts. The possible solutions are myriad. From waste heat reuse, renewable energy expansion, to the panacea that is getting over the stigma of false fears and resurgence of nuclear power that we have seen in other parts of the world. That in mind, the solution may be closer than we think. Engineering and policy challenges are the way forward, not philosophical dead ends. In fact, the development and furthering of artificial intelligence processing and analysis may very well lead us faster to this end. So, moving on to issue number 2, the real hot button issue, use in artistic creation. While environmental debates are purely technical, sprinkled with emotional response towards preservation of natural resources, the issue of artistic creation is one purely of identity-driven and it is humanity at its very core. As such, it requires a bit more delicacy and introspection of the creation and creator spectrum. Civilization is, at its very heart, tied to our artistry and culture. The insistence and availability of artificiality in this process, rightfully so, tugs at our hearts and cuts us to the core. The dawning and development of artificially created artistry is a matter on the precipice of existentiality and must be treated as such. The first step, aside from understanding the gravity of the matter, is to take a step back, detaching ourselves as much as possible from the emotional knee-jerk reaction. Artists, of course, are the first to feel this sting, more personally so than other professionals impacted. As creativity has long been a uniquely human domain, the surrealness of transhumanity triggers our uncanny valley response. Rightfully, our survival instinct only serves to root our staunch stance, buttressed by the connectivity and community of social media to feed such fears and stoke the flames of rebellion against so unnatural of an entity. The debate of style over substance is not new. One could say the same debate on a far lesser and much more human anchoring, occurring at several advancement stages. Painting and photography, theater and film, acoustic and digital, so on and so on. Accusations, fears, and claims of devaluation of talent, cheating, and debates on true art came each time. And over the time, the legitimacy of each medium has fluctuated and continues to do so depending on the individual. The artist studies and learns from those who came before, just as the writer aggregates and uses foundational thinking and texts from previous intellectuals. Even before artificial intelligence entered the fray, it was often parroted that it's all been done before and nothing under the sun is new. So where's the disconnect? I posit that the discomfort is not in the fact that AI learns. It is in the scale, speed, and automation of said learning. Now, this isn't to say that all instances of AI creation are the same. Blatant copies or alterations of existing work should be seen to the same scrutiny as human plagiarism, and should be treated exactly as harshly and with the same penalty and finality of judgment. But, for the sake of this writing, these are not the examples I am referring to. The real concerns at the heart of this matter are issues that we, as humans, have already solved among ourselves. Consent, compensation, attribution, the answers to economic and cultural problems to be addressed and issued forth in the same reasoning towards artificial creations and aggregations. I believe if these measures were equally meted out towards AI generation and engines, it would prove a good launching point to a broader acceptance of use. Again, those matters are consent, compensation, and attribution. Moving on to issue number 3, corporate and authoritarian misuse. Of course, the primary risk of artificial intelligence is in who controls it and how it is used. The danger being not of intelligence itself, but the concentration of power in the hands of those who would handle it as a weapon against the masses, and a disruption of natural equality and meritocracy. Sadly, this is an issue that has been and will always be a thorn in collective humanity's side whenever a new era is reached. To use earlier examples once more, printing presses led to power shifts and information distribution of the haves and have-nots. Industrialism did the same for labor shifts, and mass media did the same for persuasion and public opinion. Monopolies and surveillance is the latest hurdle with the age of information, And now, with the dawning of artificial intelligence, we are once more put to the grind against the opposition and oppression of the overclass. Unfortunately, I have the least amount of answers to this quandary, as it is an ever-apparent aspect of our civilization. While it is true that productivity gains benefit society overall, the short-term pain is unevenly distributed. Workers can, will, and have lost their jobs faster than economies adapt, and wealth, as always, will concentrate at the top. Social systems will continue to lag behind technological change, but the challenge is not stopping progress, but updating the social contract. Technical tools and regulations alone cannot solve the problem of power. Countermeasures must be institutional, a subject of which many a more well-versed author than I have tackled. Suffice it to say that regulations and ethical standards must be across the board and not privatized. Sadly, it would seem that our current trajectory is more in line with power remaining in the hands of the powerful, and this goes far beyond the measure of artificial intelligence. As such, AI's use in power disparages should be viewed as a symptom and not the cause. It is a magnifier of human capability in both good and bad uses. The answer is not in rejection of such tools, but the embracing and governance towards stronger norms and institutions. On a stronger scale, the same can be said of the alarming use of AI in sweeping government and wartime regulation. This is again not the fault of the tool, but of the wielder. As such, it falls to those institutions and those more informed and capable of control to govern away from such dangerous shores. So, the final issue at hand. Doomsday. Alas, in closing, we must address the proverbial elephant in the room. Since the first time in your life you have ever heard the term artificial intelligence, it was no doubt tinged black and red with klaxon trumpets, the end, the uprising, the swan song of human hubris, the rise of robot overlords, etc., etc., etc. Whether in the guise of killer robots traveling through time, rogue superintelligences, or apocalyptic futures under the sky of a color of a TV turned to a dead channel, though I doubt many born post-millennium will even understand the static field unassisted, there's been warnings against digging too deep into the future ever since the dawn of the digital age. These stories are compelling and cut deeply upon our psyche due to the themes they explore. Loss of control, human fragility, technological hubris. From Frankenstein to iRobot, our petards have been hoisted again and again in fables and stories to be retold ad nauseum. And this ever-present specter has left a burned-in image of dread that haunts us to this day. All due to the fact that narratives shape emotional expectations more than technical reality ever will. But what of the scientists and philosophers that warn that these are no mere fables? One must remember that researchers often study the worst-case scenarios for a reason. We'll get more into this in the Doomsday episode to follow. Trepidation and avoidance of folly is the mark upon the map, which reads, "Here there be dragons." It is normal in all fields, not just those of AI, which is partially to blame for our avoidance of pursuing nuclear fuel, which in and of itself could fix the issue of resource depletion, but that's another writing for another time. Exploring these situations is part of responsible risk management. We must be careful to understand that discussion of a possibility does not equal prediction of an inevitability. The current scope of AI is far and away incapable of such apocalyptic grandeur. It is not autonomous, but linked to human input and sourcing. It is not self-motivated, strategic, or physically empowered, nor is it unified or centralized. The measures are already in place, from those heeding the parables and cautious of future-proofing. In reality, the risks of artificial intelligence in truth are far more grounded in deceit than decimation. Human and institutional problems that exist already, amplified through the usage of artificial intelligence as, what again it is, a tool. In closing, humanity ever extending and expanding amongst itself. What sets us apart from other animals is the combination of our inner flame of conscience, our ambition to always aim higher, and of course thumbs. As such, we must do what we can to cast off the shackles of fear that bind us before each leap forward into the unknown. Each era of our development has been marked by the tools and technology which reshapes the very idea of what we can accomplish. And now, for the possible very first time, intelligence itself is becoming said tool. We are entering an era in which a capable mind and limitless creativity is no longer scarce. We are moving from machines that extend our bodies to algorithms and codes that extend our very minds. Faster research cycles and intrinsic data processing no longer impaired by the usual pitfalls and limits of human cognizance. In and of itself, this alone promises to provide leaps and bounds in our development, which will lead to the betterment of all, so long as it is properly regulated, monitored, and kept in check by those willing to put the good of all humanity before the benefit of the few. Alas, such balances and checks go far beyond that which is the subject of this writing. As such, we must do what we can to separate our fears of class division and power discrepancies from the matter of artificial intelligence. AI is here, and it is a tool that will usher in the possibility of a new human epoch. See, I use that pronunciation there just to be smarmy, but here we go. We're almost through this. Let us not round up the pitchforks and torches and drive it out of our lands and into the hands of the omnipotent overlords that will only use it for their own gains, but instead embrace it, learn it, teach it, regulate it, and use it to guide us towards the is-to-be of a better tomorrow. And there it is. Might be a bit drier than the content we've explored so far, and a style of my writing that might be a bit different than you're used to. That's about it as far as how I feel about this deluge of artificial intelligence chatter and politicking. And while you may not agree with me, and I might not see things the same as you, I have no negativity on how others broach this subject. Unless you're one of the entities capitalizing on the industry and pushing it towards its misuse against humanity for your own profit, then I'm probably not smiling your way anytime soon. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I am still openly looking for feedback on this bit. I appreciate seeing all sides. Please reach out to me on Facebook or at liamlykos@zohomail.com. liamlykos@zohomail.com. So I'd like to take a minute to reflect on how those two writings sum up my views on a new Aeon. Are we on the cusp of one? What should we call it? What will it be? Yes, I believe we are right in the middle of it, if not watching it approach from the horizon. It's just that, well, frankly, we'll probably never agree on what to call it. Not without some sort of dawning brilliance to suddenly tie it all together in a nice red bow. Something. Some tipping of the scales or drop of the Jenga tower that tells everyone collectively, we are here. Here we are. From here, I want to move into a reading of some quick pieces of fiction I've done. I did these in around June 6th, and it was a neat writing exercise back in 2019 I did to try and channel my ideas of what Lovecraftian horror was with absolute stream of conscious writing. No breaks, constant typing without forethought to try and make a somewhat sensible story, letting one flow into the other. You might ask what this has to do with the episode. And honestly, I believe the true essence of Lovecraft's idea of horror was looking to the future with an uncertain eye, knowing, well, as he says, we are all beings floating on a placid island of ignorance, and it's not meant that we wander far. I think his fears personally were rooted in development, in technologies coming through that were foreign to him, or in some cases, actual foreigners that were foreign to him. He got better. But yes, the core of Lovecraftian horror to me is the unknown tomorrow, which is very fitting when we ponder the entering of a new era. Again, these are horribly contrived writings, making little sense and playing out more than a bit contradictory and obtuse. But they were never meant to be anything serious, just kind of letting words flow while subtly directing them using dark ambient music and the surrounding imagery. I hope you enjoy them as much as I enjoyed writing them. Good way to round out the episode and take it into a bit of a more esoteric ending. And with that in mind, the first is titled Under the Inverse.
It was not the incessant dripping that addled me so. That would be normal, and my mind was lately far from the normative. No, it was the silence, the vacant spaces, the brief half-seconds between the vibrations and the ambient scuttle. These are the fractions in time which I feel the most disjointed, for I have seen it, that which lies in the negative space between that which is to us. And it was hardly a new theory. That which we perceive is not the sum of what exists. Various philosophical and scientific minds have pondered the layers of dimensions and perceptions. The addition of a third axis to a two-dimensional mind would seem preposterous, yet it was easily observable by us, who naturally see such a layer. Without perception into a so-called fourth dimension, we would never be able to wrap our minds around it. Of course, such concepts are nearly a trope in the current frame of modern thinking. Many link the pineal gland to expression beyond our current conscious, but one bit was almost always brushed over: negative space, that which lies under the conscious. When one writes upon paper, does not the paper exist still between that which is written and that which is not? Thus, when one speaks, is there not a surface which the vocal waves imprint their signature? When one sees, does there not exist the truly unseen, or has everything been accounted for? Human history is quite prolific after all, and we observed so much, but there's always absence. The feeling in the wake of a party's departure, the tingle in the air, or the silence post-orchestra. Something is stretching and relaxing in the abandoned sensory spaces, something we can all detect, however fleeting that detection may be. We foolishly fumble and claw at it, seeking to exercise our perception to enhance that detection. I was no different in that pursuit. What set me apart was my success, my damnable success. And so it is that the repetitive splash of so minuscule a drop of moisture was a panacea to my mind. That word keeps coming up today. momentary solace from the dread silence. If I could still scream, I would. Anything to drown it out, but my throat is barren, my voice broken for days. I have tried in vain to ignore the fact that the drips are fewer and farther between. It's almost comical. I know not how I am still alive for so long. I thought the rivulets would last longer than my cognizance. I was wrong. It will now find me. I know this for certain. My only hope is that when it does, that my contorted face, an assured rictus of dread and bleak hilarity, that the pallor of my bloodless skin, when I do meet my end, the sheer morbidity of it all will inspire stories that will be told. More sound to drive out that silence, more print to blot out that horrible blank whiteness. Anything to fill the void that awaits the departure of my thoughts, for it has flamed everything but.
And at that point, I decided to wrap it up and take a break with the stream of conscious writing. That one was more a bit of a meditation towards existential horror and liminal spaces, while our next and final piece, Symmetry, was more of a direct Lovecraftian setting familiarity. Investigators, inheritance, and laudanum. Lots and lots of laudanum. So we will continue into Symmetry. This was again written the same day, same stream of conscious, just after a bit of a break. So here we begin.
The echoing cacophony of the residents of the asylum had become something of a metronome, and momentarily I once more began to ponder the synchronicity of chaos. Surely that statement might seem a bit oxymoronic, but I beg your indulgence. You see, regardless of how asymmetrical a design or spontaneous a melody, sudden a shift, there's a pattern underneath it all. One damning in its assuredness, one maddening in its reasonability. Would it be cliché of me to suggest I might have begun this inflection a bit too far forward? Yeah, thinking a bit of a rewind is in order. It'd be rude of me to introduce you to such a yarn half-spun, so where do we begin? I could start in the beginning, or at least what I remember, but I doubt you'd remain glued to the banality of my rather uneventful upbringing in the North, nor would the pratfalls and shortcomings of my early adult life be suitable for the intonation of my current predicament. I didn't used to use such big words. Not until Boston. Not until the day I met Professor Gerald Garbrandt. His class on theoretical metaphysics. Even the concept caused me no small pause. I'd seen it as an interesting credit filler of an elective. Nothing more, nothing less. Naivety, I suppose. In hindsight, it was just another cog, another step, another chime in the maelstrom-esque symphony that the professor had but a single trepanation of. As I that would come to bear the full weight of the pandemonic drill against my skull. So I sat in my silent cell, the sun now arisen and the drugs dispensed. And even the nothingness that is everywhere, I can still hear the ticking, the machination that underlies every second, every breath. There's never a perceivable rhyme or reason, but as I had come to understand, at the cost of each strip of myself stolen by that maestro of malevolent ministrations, perception is an illusion. With any of illusion, there's always a revelation to be found. But sometimes that curtain is best left in place.
The words in that one always amused me. Maelstrom-esque and trepanation especially. I mean, what a jump to make. Going stream of conscious, like, I think I might have meant trepidation, and when I put trepanation, it automatically occurred to me what that meant. Hence the next line of the full weight of the pandemonic drill against my skull. So I like that. I liked that jump. But with that, I think it'll be time to wrap this episode up. I've gone on long enough, and it is my birthday today, July 7th. I've got some things to do and places to be. Join us next time as we sit back and watch the end of the world. Episode 10 of Occam's Lantern, we will look at doom. The end of the world, the reaping, the death of the sun, and the rapture of man. Why are we so obsessed over it, and why do we always think it's next Tuesday? Until then, keep the fire stoked and the lanterns full. This has been Liam Blackwood, and you've been listening to Occam's Lantern.